Welcome back. Now, according to Stats SA, national residential property price inflation came in at 3.3% in September. That's up from a revised 3% previously. On the other hand, the latest FNB Price Index averaged 0.9% in December, just a touch lower than the 1% in November. Siphamandla Mkhwanazi, senior economist at FNB, joins us with his assessment of current residential property trends. Siphamandla, thanks so much for your time today. So let's start with the Stats SA print, right? Residential property price inflation at 3.3% in September, close to inflation during the period, which cooled to 3.8%. What does this suggest for, let's say, the recovery in the residential property market?
Right, absolutely. Thanks for having me in your show, Ntoleng. Look, the property market appears to be on its path to recovery. Yes, the measures of house price growth will differ from one institution to the next. I mean, there are various ways that one measures house prices, and the samples that we also rely on can be different at times. But if you look at the trend itself, we are all seeing the same thing. Now, the consumer environment has been improving quite markedly over the last 12 months. You look at average salary growth, for example. An example is the newly concluded government wage agreement at 5.5%. This is higher than inflation. This is higher than what we expect inflation to be. So from a consumer perspective, we are starting to see some improvement. You look at inflation, it is relatively low at the moment. It's lower than our target, which has allowed the Reserve Bank to reduce ever so slightly the borrowing cost. So the consumer environment suggests that the broader housing market environment also is improving. So that's what you are seeing in this trend. Very slow and gradual improvement in house prices, suggesting that house owners or home owners are now starting to see a little bit of equity building up on their assets.
So the environment slowly improving, but what does the supply-demand dynamics look like?
Right. That is a good question, and one that we always grapple with. So to understand that, you need to look at it from a price perspective. Now, we always see, estates going estate buildings going up and all of that, usually in urban areas, but that's not where the masses of the people are. And you look at the average price of those tends to be on the very high end of the market. Now, when you look at the lower end of the market, you would struggle to find new build that is going to cost you 600,000 rand or 700,000 rand or so, suggesting that, when we look at the affordability question, we tend to look at it from a demand side of things, but there's also a supply side of things that you need to think about. Supply side of things is answers questions such as, can I find a property at the right price and at the right location? And that is where we are that is what we are missing at the moment. So although on the demand side of things, the consumer environment is improving, we would also like to see supply also coming into the picture, which will allow this improvement to translate into actual activity, because we can improve here, but if there isn't enough supply at the right price, at the right place, we won't see activity.
Just correct me if I'm wrong. So supply in the more affordable sort of a market.
Yes, supply in the more affordable market. So affordable market means different things to different people. So for the purposes of our conversation, let's just say those that earn somewhere around, or properties that are valued somewhere around 750 and below. Now the supply of new stock there is relatively scarce. It's very scarce. What you see rather supply in the urban areas that would cost you 1.5 million and above, which leaves the bulk of the market unattended. So that's why you tend to see house price growth in those segments being so strong, because demand actually exceeds supply in those segments of the market.
You mentioned regions, and I just want to zoom into that a bit more in detail. Is the immigration trend still working its way through the industry, or are we seeing a resurgence in Gauteng?
Right. So there are two parts to your questions, and I will answer them in turn. The semi-migration trend, we still see remnants of that, but it's actually much more. It's much more diverse than what we usually talk about.
Yeah.
People going to the Western Cape. If you look at the house price index by Stats SA itself, it shows that the highest growth is in, I think it's in Free State. It's in Limpopo and Free State. Those are your fastest growing provinces. Yes, Western Cape does. I think it's number 3, but those two are actually where you see house price growth growing. Now, what is the trend behind this? We have seen relatively more your older people, now that you can work from home, going into the neighboring provinces, neighboring towns, such as your Hardis, such as your other towns that are your Polokwanes of this world, where they would be able to get value for money and still have relatively easier access to the hub, to the economic hub, right? Now, the second part of the question was roundabout, if I remember you correctly, whether we are still seeing this immigration towards your coastal regions.
Yes.
Now, I mentioned that there's a bit more variety than that. What we are seeing now is that there is a resurgence in areas such as KwaZulu-Natal. KwaZulu-Natal, particularly Durban, has been unfortunate to deal with environmental issues. There's been political instability there. And what we are seeing now is some sort of an improvement there. Now, in Gauteng, we are also starting to see an improvement. Yes, still low. These two regions are still low relative to Cape Town, as an example, but the trend is also starting to pick up. In Gauteng specifically, in Johannesburg specifically, it is benefiting from foreign buyers who are viewing South African property as cheap. It is also benefiting from South Africans who live abroad, who want now to come back. They are specifically looking at Gauteng as well as other coastal regions outside of Cape Town, because in their view, that is where you still find value for money. Now, if you look at the data from Statistics South Africa on Johannesburg, for instance, in fact, prices in the middle of last year, prices were actually declining, meaning property was getting cheaper and cheaper, and now it's starting to increase. Now, that is value for money for those who want to enter into the market, and foreigners are taking advantage of that, particularly foreigners from other African countries.
Interesting insights there, Siphamandla. Thank you so much for joining us and just taking us through the trends playing out in the residential housing market. That was senior economist at FNB, Siphamandla Mkhwanazi.